MoEngage. Thank you all for joining us today. I know a couple people are still trickling in. Today, we're going to talk all about email deliverability and engagement strategies to boost your 2021 campaigns. So just a few logistics before we get started. If you have a question, please use the Q&A tab on the Zoom webinar. You can also leverage the chat function if you're having any kind of technical issues or you need some support, and we'll be able to help you throughout the presentation. Just a quick look at our agenda. My name is Megan again, and I oversee the North America marketing team here at MoEngage, and I'm joined today by Alice, who manages the email deliverability at change.org, and Brittany, who is a partner at the agency Chameleon Collective. And we're going to share some email marketing strategies really around deliverability and engagement so that you can walk away with some concepts and techniques to inform your strategy for this year. And so with that, I'm going to pass it over to Alice, and she's going to kick it off with her experience at change.org and share some basics of email deliverability as well.
Thanks, Megan. Yes, absolutely. Thank you for having me. Great to be here. I am Alice Cornell, Director of Email Deliverability at change.org. My pronouns are she, hers. You may have heard of change.org. We are the world's largest platform for social change. Anyone can come to our site and use our tools to create a petition, create a community, and create change in the world. And we're used by over 400 million people across the world. And we're sending over 1 billion mails a month in support of those users. So as you can imagine, email is quite important for us. In fact, it's pretty crucial. It's a key driver of engagement and of revenue. And so it's super important that the emails that we're sending reach people's inboxes. And of course, that is what deliverability is all about. So let me tell you a little bit about our email journey. We've been on quite a journey. 7 years ago, virality was really important to us, getting more people to sign more petitions. And we were sending batch and blast country to country. So I think we've all been there. And if you've got a small database, possibly you are still there, and there's nothing wrong with that. But as we grew, we realized we had to get much more sophisticated about how we sent our email. And we started targeting based on themes, such as women's rights, human rights, etc., to try and get relevant content in front of our users. But that can be quite limiting. Just because you sign one petition about puppies doesn't necessarily mean you want to hear about animal petitions for moving forwards. So we started breaking out our database further and using segmentation to better target people. So we're now still sticking with our content themes to some extent, but we're also using geolocation, which is great. People feel very passionately about things that are close to home. But we're also segmenting on engagement levels. So I'll talk more about that in a moment, but that's been really successful for us. It might be something that you can use or something similar. And what we're trying to get towards is we're really trying to get to a more automated platform. If we're ever to get to our goal of 1 billion users, we are going to need to really rely on machine learning to help us match our content with the right audience. We're just not going to be able to serve all those people with manually curated mail. But this is quite a big challenge as we're an open platform. And so we want to make sure that we are getting the right message in front of the right person, but without creating an echo chamber for our users. And so we have to move towards this carefully. And that is our latest challenge, an amazing team of people working on that. But let's talk a little bit more about segments, because it was pretty game-changing for us, but not really rocket science. And a lot of you may be using segmentation already. What we tried was we send our most engaged users more mail and less engaged users less mail. So we want to recognize that people use our site in different ways, and they may have different appetites for new campaign suggestions and communications. So separating out these cohorts has been really good for us. You can see the proof is in the pudding in the stats. What I will say is overall, we actually send less mail, but we significantly increased our core email metrics, such as open and click. But what we were most pleased by was the increase in our signature rate, because this is a key performance indicator for us. It's probably your conversion rate, if you like, and this increased by 30%. So this was fantastic. And unsubscribes reduced by 50%. So just, we're just really overjoyed with those stats. However, we've still got lots of work to do in so many areas, but I wanted to share this with you as an example of what you might be able to use in your own program, and we'll talk in some more detail about that later. But before we get there, I mean, whatever volume you're sending, you're reaching the inbox really depends on some deliverability basics. You have to have a good foundation for your program if you're going to get your mail to deliver. So let's talk about some of those basics now, because these are things that everybody needs to have implemented. So we'll start with infrastructure. So it's really important to build a good sender reputation if your email is going to be trusted by mailbox providers like Gmail, like Microsoft, Verizon Media Group, who of course is Yahoo and AOL. And of course, all those mailbox providers have different ways of measuring that reputation. But the reputation is tied to your sending IPs. And now with the advent of IPv6, more and more towards your sending domain. So keeping sending domain and IPs consistent will help you to build that reputation and be recognized as a good sender. Mailbox providers don't like surprises, and we know that spammers jump from IP to IP, they burn IPs and move on. So it's seen as very spammy behavior. Sticking with your sending infrastructure is really important. It's also really important to make sure you're authenticating your mail, definitely with DKIM and SPF, and with DMARC2 if you can. You probably want to discuss this with your email service provider or your tech support team. This type of authentication is just the basic of proving you are who you say you are within the email world. So those are both really important. And of course, the next crucial thing is you need to follow the legal requirements for the countries that you operate in. So wherever you send, you need to make sure that you are whether it's GDPR in Europe or CASL in Canada or CAN-SPAM in the States, etc. And part of that, and probably the most essential thing, is making sure that you have a clear and visible unsubscribe in your email. It's nearly always necessary, not for every type of mail, but on the whole, giving people a way to unsubscribe from your mail if they don't want it is essential. And actually, unsubscribes can be a really helpful metric. They indicate where you need to improve your program. If people are unsubscribing, why are they unsubscribing? Are you sending them too often, or does the content they're receiving not make sense to them? So it's really, it's an opportunity to fix an issue. And of course, you'd much rather that folks unsubscribed than they hit the "this is spam" button, which of course severely damages your reputation. I mean, what can be clearer than a user marking your mail as spam? It shows that it's truly unwanted and belongs in the spam folder. And the final thing I want to touch on in infrastructure is around, if you do have new IPs or a new sending domain or even a new mail stream, you might want to ramp up the volume quite slowly and carefully. You need to cultivate that good reputation before you deluge mailbox providers with new traffic. As I said, don't like surprises. You need to learn to trust, build up that trust with your mail, trust that it's safe, that it's wanted, that it belongs in the inbox. So moving on to data acquisition and list hygiene, I always say that data is the most important thing for a good email program. And the three most important things: data, data, and data. And of course, the first thing is to make sure that you're mailing people that want and expect to receive mail from you. You also need to look after your database. Clean invalid addresses from your list. Invalid addresses will usually return a hard bounce, and you should be excluding those as quickly as you can. Having too many in your database really makes your sends look like spam. As we know, spammers don't care what addresses they send to. They've scraped them, they've gathered them, they've bought them. And so you need to make sure that the mailbox providers can see that you take care of your database. it's a good idea to try to prevent people from adding incorrect or miskeyed addresses at the point of sign. And this doesn't have to be via an email verification partner, although it might be, but there you can also implement simple scripts that you can add to that point of sign to identify miskeys. So Gmail instead of Gmail, for example, or fraudulent signups. And this can really help to prevent garbage into your database, because we know what garbage in means. Finally, be careful how you treat the least active elements of your list. I have found that the number one cause of deliverability issues that I come up against when I'm consulting for organizations is people hanging on to old addresses for way too long. Let them go if they're not engaging, or rethink how you communicate with them, because it might be that you want to let your inactives go entirely after 3 months or a year or 2 years. It's going to be really different from organization to organization, and you need to work out your own sweet spot. But either reducing the amount of mail you send to them or letting them go gracefully can really do wonders for your deliverability. That dead wood could be holding you back from reaching your whole database. And so we'll move on to engagement. And this is the real secret to deliverability. And I'll share it with you today. It is to send mail that people want to receive and that they respond positively to. One of the major mailbox providers once explained that it's actually really difficult for them to tell the difference between spam and bulk mail. And actually the key indicator is how users respond to it. Spammers also use best practices. They have unsubscribes and welcome mails and all the rest of it. But the key to it is if the mailbox provider's customers like the mail they're receiving. If they're opening it and reading it, then great. But if they're ignoring it or deleting it without reading it, then, or even worse, of course, hitting the spam button, the mailbox providers assume it's not wanted and it's going to go straight to the spam folder. I'd also say keep a close eye on your complaints and your unsubscribe rate. They can really show you if your users are unhappy, as I mentioned before. And I always say that a deliverability issue indicates there's an improvement you can make to your program to improve your customer's experience, because a happy, engaged audience means inbox placement as well as conversions. And it's always good to look at your program from a user perspective. So it's good to test everything, assume nothing. It's in the email world, everything's constantly changing. So you can never rest on your laurels. What works for you now might be old news in a few months' time. But ultimately, however big or small your database, you have to remember that each of those emails on your list belongs to a real user. And you need to respect them and treat them with the respect they deserve. They've given you the opportunity to communicate with them. So treat them well. I will now pass you over to Megan to explore how, once we've got these kinds of basics in place, we can really deepen our engagement with those users. Thanks, Megan.
Thank you so much, Alice. Really excited to be here today. So I'm going to walk through just a couple more strategies for increasing engagement, which obviously, as we know, will help improve your deliverability. For those who don't know MoEngage, just wanted to give you a quick overview of who we are. So we are an insights-led customer engagement platform, and we really help marketers as well as product owners scale their customer engagement strategies. So we provide solutions around analyzing insights and segmentation, engagement, optimization, as well as personalization across multiple touch points and channels. From the email side specifically, our solution really allows you to engage with your users. Now, when it comes to email, there are some standards that most email platforms have. We provide, I think the AI differentiator. So a lot of our insights are at the hands of marketers to be able to take advantage of that. You can leverage our platform to create emails without code, send event-triggered based emails, as well as alerts and updates. And we do have some deliverability experts in-house to support you as well. So if you are, really focused on your email strategy and you're thinking about how to incorporate email into your multi-channel strategy, we can also help with that. Brittany's going to talk a little bit about some strategies behind that in her session, but wanted to just at least share with you some of the channels that you could leverage a platform like ours on before we get started. So I'm going to be talking to you today about some engagement strategies. I'll cover segmentation as well as automated removal of bad actors, content relevance, personalization, and then monitoring. So in terms of segmentation, there's definitely not a one size fits all. And I know that's not something everyone wants to hear, but it really does depend on your individual strategy. And so when it comes to send frequency, this is, I think, a critical part of engagement. I love Alice's example around sending more to those that are engaged versus sending less to those that aren't. And so, one example I like to think about is if you are an organization that maybe targets customers during the holidays. So maybe you're a retailer or an e-commerce company, you may see a large volume of engagement over the holiday period, but those same users may not be engaged with you all year round. And so it's really important to look at each one of your individual segments, see who's engaged, see who's not engaged, and set frequency caps on certain segments and users. That way you can send more mail to those that are engaging within certain time periods versus others. And separating them will really help improve your email program overall, because you're going to be able to match the frequency that your user is expecting from you. So talking a little bit about segmentation strategies, there's so many different ways you can segment. I mean, I think it comes down to what do you do and how do you help and what are people interested in? And so I like to think about segmentation in categories. So when you're segmenting your users, think about the collection points and tailor certain patterns based on those segments. So an example could be maybe dividing your users into categories such as, loyal users versus those users that are lost, or maybe some of the ones that are hibernating, like the ones who are not purchasing during the holidays. Maybe they're hibernating until, next fall season, if you're thinking about Black Friday in the US. And then also thinking about creating dynamic segments. And so dynamic segments could be, basically segments that will change as your users' interests or preferences change. And so you would need a pretty sophisticated email platform to do this, but it is a great way so that you're not having to spend so much time in the manual weeds and segmenting, but you can really rely on your users, each individual user's interests and preferences. And always look at the performance trends. I mean, I think, data is something that Alice definitely highlighted. It's so important. Being able to see, trends and drops and gains, it will really help you optimize your send frequency, but also your segmentation strategy over time. So this next one is something we're probably all pretty familiar with. I think this is a critical one for ensuring deliverability as well. You're going to have users that will need to be removed from your list. And I know for every marketer, we always want to see a really, really big list. We want to have, more at bats. We want to be able to communicate to more of our audiences. But at the end of the day, it's going to come down to who are the people who are engaged and who are the ones who are going to continuously engage with you, read your content, buy from you. And so when it comes to deliverability and getting seen more in the inbox, this is a critical piece of that. Hard bounces are, invalid users or domains. These do not belong in your email list. And I definitely suggest trying to remove those, at least on a regular basis. Same thing with spam complaints. So if you are getting marked as spam, definitely remove those ASAP. From a compliance perspective, that's important. You don't want to mail to them again, but you also just want to make sure that you're keeping your list very clean. And similar with unsubscribes. I think Alice made a note to that this is a benefit, right? Being able to see when people unsubscribe will help you change your strategy, but make your unsubscribes very noticeable. Make it easy for them to unsubscribe. I've received so many emails where I'm, searching for the unsubscribe option and I can't find it, and that just frustrates users. So being able to give them the option to unsubscribe or even change their email frequency will help your strategy overall. So in terms of personalization, I think there's a lot of ways to think about personalization, and everyone's going to be on a different journey. Some people may be getting started with it. Others may have, been personalizing content and emails for a while, and they just want to take it to that next level. It doesn't matter where you are in your journey. It's just about being able to start small and then try to grow over time. So the way we like to think about it with our customers is to have 3 stages. So at the very basic level, you're going to think about it from an onboarding perspective. When you welcome a new user, you're welcoming a new customer. Then, the second stage would be around engagement. So now you have a customer or a user in your database. How do you consistently engage them? And then the last piece of this is retention. So we want to retain any loyal customers that we have. And so thinking about a personalization strategy across that customer lifecycle and that journey will help you prioritize some of your personalization and in some of the content that you have for each of those stages. So an example I like to use is a retail brand. So if you're a retail brand, maybe you have an upcoming sale. You may originally send a new customer a welcome email so that they can learn more about your company or your items. Then you may want to send them, some kind of sale or offer at the engagement stage to try to incentivize them to continue to go to your website or continue to view your content. Email is obviously a great tactic to be able to drive people to the web. And then on the retention side, maybe you've had a customer for quite some time and you're just trying to look at new ways to engage them because maybe their engagement's starting to decrease. Think about adding them to a retention campaign, maybe offering some personalized content based on older purchases or content that's based on certain pages that maybe they visited before, and being able to trigger that based on those actions to try to retain them and to get them back into your website or back into your email engagement campaign. So the critical thing when it comes to personalization, as we all know, not everyone wants to see the same thing. You really want to make sure that you're creating relevant content for emails for each of your users or your segments. Obviously, this is really hard to do at scale, especially if you have a huge email database. So look at some of the segments, try to find some commonalities, at least to start small, and start with personalizing just one segment at a time and personalizing content for that segment. So a couple tips, always ensure your subject line is compelling, ensure that the content is actually worth the user's time and what they care about. And then, include any vital information about the content. So maybe you're using email for a promotion or an event, making sure that you include respective dates, limited terms or conditions, making sure that they feel comfortable with the content so that they don't feel deceived. And in stating that too, you can even leverage that in the subject line to be able to show that, when they click on that email, they know exactly what they're going to expect. I love this image from Accenture. Really, they provide some recommendations around relevance when creating emails. And I think, looking at certain types of ways to personalize based on past purchases, purchase history, recognizing them by name, or even a combination of those options can really help just make the email feel more one-to-one. Because at the end of the day, we're communicating with them online, but you want it to feel special to them. You want it to feel personalized to them. And then other than relevance, definitely having an email that's aesthetically pleasing. Brittany's going to be covering a little bit about design in her section, but really, email should properly render on all devices, especially mobile nowadays, and then providing, conformity to the brand. You don't want your brand to look different from your emails. And then of course, making sure that the email is also readable and not distorted on certain devices. So in terms of dynamic content, this is definitely a great way to get more engagement and personalize. I've just provided a couple examples to the left around how to think about dynamic content. You can do this through personalized offers. Maybe it's content alerts when you have a new blog up or a new product or solution. Maybe it's program recommendations or price drop alerts if you're thinking about a sale. So there's so many different ways to leverage dynamic content, but what it comes down to is really making sure that your emails are personalized for the segment and what they care about. So the segmentation piece that we covered is so important so that you can start to understand really different groups of users that you have and what kind of content they like to consume. And so all of this will lead to hopefully higher opens and clicks, and as well as higher conversions for you too, and it will help with deliverability as well. And so this is my last slide, and then I'm going to hand it over to Brittany. Definitely monitoring ongoing sends is so important. Some things to watch out for: volume trends. You'll see, to the right, this is an example of a good volume trend. It's growing steadily over time, where you can see, in terms of a send, a bad volume trend, you have a spike. So that's definitely a red flag. So just something to watch out for. Always check on your performance metrics too. Look to see if there's any unusual trends on hard bounces or spam complaints or unsubscribes. And then in terms of reputation data, definitely check Google Postmaster and SNDS data. And in terms of some tools, feel free to leverage some of these. These are always recommended just to check and see. But if you find any issues, solve for it quickly, and monitor it for the next 2 to 3 weeks to see if that's been able to improve. And with that, I will pass it over to Brittany.
Thanks, Megan. Hi, everyone. So in my role at Chameleon, I am often working with clients in e-commerce or in finance, really the whole gamut of different industries. And in my role, I'm taking a look at marketing across the board. So SEO, website performance, paid advertising across a wide variety of different channels, and email as well. And so today I'd like to talk to you a little bit about how email fits in and how we need to start thinking about mobile as it fits into some of the other shifts that we're seeing across the marketplace. First, just a little bit of a background on Chameleon Collective. So we are 100 strong and counting. We're not a traditional agency. We're actually a group of consultants that operate across North America and in Europe. And again, we operate across a wide variety of industries. Sometimes we are heads down consultants that are doing roll up your sleeves type work and executional. And then other times we're placing interim executives within companies to help a company move from where they are today to their next stage in their business life cycle. So back to mobile and email, it's really time for us to think about moving to mobile first across the board. So those of you that work hand in hand with your website teams are probably aware of this Google page experience update coming in May. Long gone are the days of non-responsive websites of 2006. I mean, think back to when we all had Blackberries and we're, trying so hard to scroll around on a website, and it was just so frustrating. Now we have websites that respond based on your individual device. And Google is now starting to favor that mobile experience, including how they are addressing search results. This is also going to be true for AMP emails that we hear a little bit trickling in about as they come to light later this year. As marketers, we know that we have a lot of different touch points. We have digital advertising, we have offline and direct. Sometimes for those of us that are in B2B, we have some thought leadership pieces, so white papers and case studies. If you're in the e-commerce world, you have cart activation, email marketing, like Alice was talking about. We also have content syndication, organic media that can include PR, guest blogging, organic traffic. And last, we have customer loyalty and word of mouth, loyalty and rewards programs, refer a friend programs. These are all things that we're really familiar with. But I think what tends to happen is we give a lot of thought to the mobile experience everywhere, except sometimes focusing truly on email and what that experience might look like. So for this portion of the presentation, I'd like to get back to basics. This might be familiar for a lot of you, but I think it's important to do a little bit of a gut check in different stages of your business life cycle and make sure that you're really paying attention to some foundational components of your email marketing campaign. So first off, my number one piece of advice is to find some brands that you love. On the right-hand side, and I should mention that all of the brands that I'm talking about are not clients of mine. They're brands that I just truly love and appreciate the work that they're doing in this space. I love food. I don't know anybody that doesn't love food. On the right, we have Goldbelly, and I think they're doing a really wonderful job with their email components. Some other brands that I have here, Peloton, Patagonia, REI, Nectar. Look at emails that you personally as a consumer or as a business person enjoy receiving and start making a list of why it is that you really like it. Is it the short copy? Is it a bright call to action like we see in this Goldbelly email? Is it just straightforward language that's not fluffy marketing speak? And so start making out a matrix that really aligns what exactly it is that you like about each of these brands and why you look up to them, and start thinking about how you can incorporate them into your own strategy. Next up, define your goals. So Alice did a great job of talking about the goals that they're defining at change.org. So whether you're selling a mattress or trying to get folks to RSVP to a webinar like this one, you need to make sure that your call to action is large, in charge, and above the fold. How many times do we open an email where we have to scroll incessantly to try to find, where we need to click? And Megan talked about finding an unsubscribe link. Is it hard to do what you're asking folks to do? we need to make sure that any action that you're asking an individual to take is easy to find and easy to tap on from a mobile device. Outline a testing strategy. So here I would encourage you to challenge your assumptions. Some of you might be in the B2C space, some of you might be in the B2B world, and you may have come from a different organization prior to the role that you're in right now. You might have found success sending at certain send times. You might have found success with certain colors of call to action buttons, but I would challenge you to challenge those assumptions. Every single audience is different. Every audience segment is going to respond to different content, different colors, different lengths of text. We need to make sure that we're always adjusting accordingly and seeing if something new might resonate to improve our calls to action. The image on the left is not an error. We need to start checking for compliance. So again, for those of you in the website world, you might be hearing a lot about ADA compliance. This is true for email as well. We need to make sure that we are making all of our emails accessible to any audience that has accessibility needs. On the left-hand side, this is a screenshot of an email, or from an email rather, that I received just this week, where there were two images side by side, and that alt text behind that image says, display images to show real-time content. It's great that there's alt text there, but it's not telling me anything about that message or that email. And so we want to make sure that we're always including alt text, avoid major promotions within an image. I see retailers do this all the time. You have a major sale going on and it says 20% off, ends Saturday. And then there's absolutely no reference to it either in the image alt text or within the copy itself. So we need to make sure that we are supplementing those images with alt text that makes sense and describes what somebody should anticipate when an image doesn't load, and supplement text with a similar plain text alongside of those images to make sure that your message is not lost. And then web design versus email design. I have this conversation with a lot of different brands. We all love our brands. They're our babies. We're very passionate about them. But web design is different from email design. Background images don't always work. Things are not always going to be quite as pretty as what you have on your website if you're doing it right. The fonts you use on your website might not be email safe. I've included a list. I'm not going to bore you reading through this slide, but there are certain fonts that work really well in email. And it's not to say that you can't use other fonts, but it's important to start testing to see what your font is that you're including in an email versus how it's being displayed. And if you are using a special font on your website and your brand, you will need to set some backup fonts as well to make sure that there's a fallback option that is similar to your brand, so that you're not surprised. There's nothing worse than having a really beautiful font and then sending out an email and it shows up in Times New Roman, and that's not at all what you wanted, and it doesn't look quite right or fit in with your template. And so I have a sample here, thanks to Email on Acid, one of my favorite tools to use, that shows how you would stylize a sequence of fallback fonts. Design for mobile first. If your email is easy to read on mobile, it's going to look great on desktop. The Apple iPhone built-in client is the most popular email client right now, by far. Here I have an example from another brand I love. On the left is how the email looked on desktop, and on the right is how it looked in dark mode. And that's a new trend that I'd like to explore with all of you today. So here we have two e-commerce examples of dark mode design. On the left, I'm sure some of these brands are going to look familiar to you, even though they're not labeled. So the left is a popular e-commerce store that sells home goods. On the right, this is a popular brand in the mattress e-commerce space. I think it's interesting how these two brands are using different calls to action, how they're popping, how they're displaying differently.
I think Brittany just cut out for a moment. Let's give her a second to come back.
It always happens at the worst possible time.
That's home Wi-Fi for you.
She's back.
I'm back. I don't know what happens. It's the pandemic. Where did you last hear me?
You were just walking through the unnamed mattress example.
Perfect. So in both of these examples, we have an experience that while they're wildly different, the calls to action really pop, they're large, they're easy to click on. And in both situations, we actually have a scenario where the content is in pure HTML. There's no text over images here. The content is not getting lost. So great experience across both of these emails. And then please test. Use an email testing tool, again, like an email on Acid, to see how your emails are going to appear in different email clients. If you work in B2B, please pay particular attention to Outlook. I'm sure you've all experienced how much of a beast it can be to accommodate, especially for organizations that are still on an older version of Outlook. When you take a look at how your emails are displaying in some of these email tools, you'll notice that maybe the padding is not correct around an image or a call to action. So, make sure that you're testing. And also, to Alice's point earlier, and take a look at what clients your subscribers are looking at. If this is not relevant to you, if most of your subscribers are using Gmail, then maybe you don't have to pay attention so much to this, but it's still across the board worth testing. Perfect. And so just to recap, again, we want to find the brands that you love, make sure that you're defining your goals and KPIs for your organization, set forth a testing strategy, make sure you're checking for compliance, accept that email design is going to be a little bit different from web design, design for mobile first, and then perform extensive device testing. With that, I will pass it back to Megan. Thanks for bearing with me through technical difficulties.
Thank you, Brittany. Appreciate it. And thanks everyone for hanging on. So we're going to kick it off with some Q&A. If you do have a question for anyone on the panel today, please use the Q&A tab on the webinar screen. And so I'm going to first start with one. This is probably for you, Alice. What are some tactics you've used at change.org for developing your email audience size?
So I always feel a bit worried about when we talk about email audience size, because sometimes people look at their list and they look at the amount of people they have on the list, and it's a real vanity metric. Whereas really what's most important is how engaged the users on your list are. So at change.org, we have different challenges, but having people join the site is not one of them, but deepening that engagement with users and having them come back and take more action is much more important to us. So that deepening of engagement is the thing, and the amount of users on your list is not so crucial.
Thanks, Alice. Brittany, so when it comes to email design specifically, how many variations or templates would you consider to keep users engaged?
So I think the non-answer is that it depends on the organization. Usually I like to recommend that organizations keep it simple. It's all based on the size and capabilities and bandwidth of your team and how many templates you can maintain. But I would suggest having one promotional template, one more of an editorial newsletter style template, and then one that you're using for follow-ups, transactions if you're in e-commerce, or maybe like a white paper download thank you email if you're in the B2B space. But rather than having too many templates that are really hard to maintain when you're doing some of these more sophisticated segmentations, try doing A/B tests within a template itself. Test the copy length, test the calls to action, do subject line testing, which I think both you and Alice brought up a couple of times throughout the presentation. I would say keep things simple, and then you'll be able to see a greater impact without having to comb through so much data in a larger segmentation.
Great, thank you, Brittany. Another follow-up question for you. How do you suggest nurturing email traffic across digital channels?
That's a great question. I think, SMS is really important when we're talking about any sort of e-commerce transaction. So if somebody signs up for your newsletter list and you see that they've created a cart and they've abandoned it, consider following up with them a little bit later to complete their purchase. You can also then incorporate retargeting ads as well if they haven't completed their purchase. I think, consider how all of those channels are working together, and use email to continue to remind and stay top of mind. You want to take up that real estate within your inbox. Again, based off of any sort of segmentation that you've done to determine what the best send time is.
Great, thank you. So this one came in, and I think all of us could probably answer it. Does your team perform A/B testing as part of your engagement strategy? Does it help with splitting up the same groups, mixing the group A and audience and group B with audience, not having the same audience in group A and group B mailing lists?
Well, I can pile in to begin with. We certainly A/B test and we find it absolutely invaluable. And we test with random segments. We also test within our segments. But what I also really recommend you do is you think up two of your usual, if you're subject line testing, for example, think of 2 subject lines and then think of a wild card to throw in just to see how people respond to it. So don't become too conservative in your testing, but your users may surprise you.
Yeah, and I would just add on to that. I mean, I think when it comes to A/B testing, it is testing, right? It's trial and error. And, sometimes you may want to do an A/B/C type test, right? It really comes down to seeing what's working and what's not working. There's also a lot of intelligence that some email platforms are starting to get now where they can make recommendations on what is the best sample that's working and what's the best test that's working. That's something that we use for our customers here so that they can really see, as the email is going out, which test is winning, and it would allow you to optimize for the test that is. So, I mean, I think it just comes down to being able to do multiple tests. I mean, you're not going to learn too much with one A/B test, but over a pattern of time, you'll start to get a sense of what's best in terms of engagement. Okay, so moving on to another question. Let's see. So you mentioned that we should remove bounces and unsubscribes from the list to improve deliverability. Do you mean once the email marketing platform has put them aside, or we should delete them from the lists?
I mean, I would say you should delete those email addresses from your list because they are no longer valid. It's not valid data to keep with that record. So if you have another way of contacting that user, then that's preferable. You're not going to be able to use that email address. It's a dead address. And if they've unsubscribed with it, then you certainly shouldn't be sending email to them again.
Yeah, I mean, I would echo what Alice said just there. Okay, another question. How should you think about creating personalized content for email? I'm happy to jump in, and I'm sure Brittany and Alice would want to say something too. So this is an interesting topic. It really depends on what value you have. And I know that's not really a great answer to share, but for us, when it comes to personalized content, we want to look at what kind of topics or themes do our audiences care about, and being able to create email content that's aligned with those specific topics or themes. And when it comes to, specifically thinking around strategy, I really do love the strategy Alice led with. And it's something that, we would suggest as well to customers around being able to send more email to those people who are engaged. Because when you send the same type of, blast email to everyone, your performance isn't going to be ideal and you're not going to get the engagement that you'd like. But start small, focus on maybe 3 segments and trying to personalize content based on specific topics or themes. Maybe it's products. Maybe you have, some customers that only purchase certain types of products from you. And maybe you want to think about creating a personalized content strategy that's aligned with those types of products.
I would definitely agree. Megan, and also just say that, you know, whatever elements of personalization you can introduce are really worthwhile, because each of your recipients wants to feel that you're talking directly to them. They want to feel like they're having a conversation with you. And I think that the contract that we make with our users has changed in recent times to be, people expect more from their email. They expect it to be a personalized experience. And those days of sort of blast marketing are over. So the more personal you can make your mail, the better. And I think that's what our users expect.
Great. Let's see. We do have a poll that we just put up. I know we're getting a lot of questions in. I'm so excited to see all the engagement. So thank you so much. This poll is really around, you know, what areas would you like to improve most in your email strategy? We're just kind of just a couple more seconds and then we will end the poll. Okay, I'm going to hit end now. Wow, great to see the engagement. Thanks, everyone.
I was going to say, can we have an all of the above option, but it's okay.
I think it's all of the above all the time. So hopefully you guys can see the poll results. So it looks like, you know, personalization is one area for improvement, certainly, as well as deliverability. And then, you know, some of the other categories, segmentation, quality, list growth, multi-channel journey orchestration are definitely up there too. So it sounds like all the above would have been a popular choice. I'm just looking at some of the other questions. I want to be conscious of time as well and for our presenters. So considering bounces, would you remove soft bounce emails as well? Alice, do you want to answer that one?
I would retry soft bounce emails depending on what the bounce code is. Some soft bounces are worth retrying. Bounce codes are a whole new story that we could have a whole presentation on, because hard and soft are sometimes designated in confusing ways. So I wouldn't necessarily make a hard and fast rule that I always remove hard bounce 500 codes and I always retry 400 codes. It really does depend on the bounce, and I'm sorry, because that's not the answer that you want.
Another one, this one's for you, Brittany. Thank you for your presentation. How do you manage traffic to users with different scenarios like automation, transactional, and single sends?
I would say, how do you prefer to be communicated with? When it comes to transactional, if I place an order, I want to make sure that I am getting an email confirmation immediately after I place my order, perhaps even a text message or you know, let somebody opt into SMS updates in case they miss your emails. I would also say over communicate on transactional emails. As a consumer, I often place an order and then I maybe get a confirmation email, but then I'm lacking the shipping confirmation or any order changes. I just had an order canceled yesterday and the retailer didn't tell me why it was canceled. They just said, sorry, we're going to refund you your money. So, you know, make sure that you're thinking from a personal perspective. How do you want to be communicated with? And then go from there. When it comes to single sends, you know, I'm going to go back to Alice here, you know, test. My email inbox is a black hole. Things just disappear and get lost in there. So you might have folks like change.org who enjoy getting emails regularly because they're very passionate about whatever topic it is that your content is displaying in those emails. Some folks maybe only want to hear from you once in a while. So test that, see which person likes to receive a certain frequency, and then adjust your content calendar accordingly. This might mean that you have one group that gets 2 emails a week, one group that gets 1 email a week, and one group that gets 1 email every other week or once a month. All of those are okay answers. So just test and see how your particular database responds. Alice, did you want to add anything there? No. Okay.
I think you covered that comprehensively.
All right, thanks, Brittany. So this one actually, I think, kind of hits on a question that maybe, Brittany, you talked about a little earlier. So this one is, should we keep a common template throughout the customer journey?
Probably. I think it's probably dependent on what's happening within that journey. If it's a transactional email, I want to, have that brand recognition, especially if you're not a brand that I'm familiar with. We want to, from a marketing perspective, encourage that recognition of your logo and your content and your branding. So if somebody does see a retargeting ad elsewhere online, there's that visual connection between all of the different components. So, make sure that things are matching across the board. But I would say if you have different templates within a transactional theme versus an editorial theme, it's okay to have a little bit of variation, but you still want to make sure that your brand is front and center and you're not, straying too far away from the look and feel across the board.
Thanks, Brittany. So this one is from Diane. In your subscription portal, what are some key fields you collect at the beginning, and how do you collect more information to allow for geo-targeting interests and preferences? I'll add some context, and then I'll let Alice and Brittany share any thoughts they have. So this is, again, something that will depend on what data it matters most to you. Obviously, there's going to be user properties that almost every organization cares about. So, who they are, it could be, age related, it could be name, it could be gender, it could be location, especially if you're thinking about doing any kind of geolocation campaigns or content. It's important to understand, where people live, because that will just help you be a little more targeted. Enriched data is something that I think gets added over time. So, for us, being able to enrich data based off of, what kind of newsletters are they subscribed to, or, what is their affinity in terms of, a purchaser? Are they someone who is an active purchaser, a loyal customer? Are they someone who, buys something every so often? Even user actions is something that you should be able to look at and capture. Are they engaged on your email? Are they viewing your website? Are they looking at your mobile app? And so depending on the platform that you're using, being able to collect data like that, and also understand campaign interactions too, what kind of content are they engaged with? What emails are they opening? All of that information is very useful, and being able to have that kind of customer profile that's unified so that you can get a holistic view is important, I think, in being able to create a holistic strategy. Does anyone want to add on to that?
I'll just add one thing, and that is, if you are operating in a GDPR country, then it might be a good idea to make sure that you are at the point of people signing up to you, they're giving your consent. They're giving their consent for you to email them, that you document the IP that they use and the time and the date that they do it, because it may be necessary to prove that consent at a later date. So if you're starting at the beginning with gathering data, that's a really good one to have under your belt.
Great. So this one is from Petro. I have a technical question. Sometimes when you get a bad start with email campaigns, your domains start to burn out and your emails go to spam. What kind of technique should be used to increase domain reputation or deliverability score?
Well, I can definitely jump in because this is sort of what I was talking about earlier. I was talking about ramping up your volume so that you build your reputation slowly. And if you start to see mail going to the spam folder, then you know that there's something about that mail that isn't being enjoyed by your users. They're not engaging with it well. It's more likely to go to the spam folder. So when you're doing a ramp up, you want to think about sending to your most engaged users first to build the best reputation that you can, and then adding less engaged users as you go, but monitoring the metrics that you see from that traffic. And when you see those metrics begin to become negative, high unsubscribes, high complaints, less positive engagement, then you know that either you need to improve the quality of the traffic that you're sending, or you need to reduce the poor quality traffic that you're trying to deliver. Does that make sense?
Yep, thanks, Alice. And so I know we're getting close to the top of the hour, so we'll just take one more question. We do have a record of the questions that have come through. If you'd like to chat with any of us, we'd love to speak with you as well. So we'll try to get to everyone after the presentation. So for this one, how do you organize your segments if you have only one product to sell? It's an interesting question. I would say, from my perspective, think too about what does your product do, and going back to the segmentation around themes. So if you're thinking about segments, I mean, definitely look at how engaged people are, of course, but also thinking about like what they're engaged with, what do they care about, what are they interested in? And so trying to align it with that. I mean, just speaking from MoEngage's strategy, we have obviously a breadth of different channels that we support customers with in terms of their engagement. And so we may want to speak to email as a theme and email best practice and thought leadership, similar to how we're doing this webinar today. Or we may want to speak to personalization tactics because we know that some people care more about the personalization side of a strategy. And so that's obviously more on the B2B side. But if you're a B2C customer, it would be applicable as well. So if you have one product, maybe all you sell is t-shirts, have segments that are organized around the types of t-shirts. Maybe there's long sleeve, there's short sleeve, maybe it's certain fabric or quality. So think about things that could be related back to that persona. What do they like to do? What are they interested in? And trying to align a segmentation strategy with that. It's just one option. I mean, you can really create a segmentation strategy any way you want. It's just going to be what works for your brand. Okay, cool. Well, thank you everyone again for taking the time with us today. I want to thank our presenters especially for meeting with us and for taking this time. It was a really good session. We were excited by all of the engagement. We will be following up with a recording of this session in the coming days. So thanks again for joining us, and thanks again to our presenters, and have a great rest of your day.